So let's now look at how can we use these assemblies both with characters and machinery such as cranes and conveyors. So I'm going to, I just saved that assembly that we created in the previous tutorial. And now let's create a conveyor over here. So let's see how we set up conveyors. You don't have to use a conveyor. You can just use characters, and then you can just use characters directly with assemblies. But in this case, I also want to show how conveyors are used. So you can press Control P on your keyboard, type conveyor, and then you should see engine pattern conveyor, and then you can drag and drop that here. So this is already set up actually. So let's try to do that again. So you want to select the generic conveyor over here. So this is like the base conveyor that you can extend to or set up the way you want. The other way of reaching this is to go to motion flow content, ensure that you're in the content browser on the bottom right here under view options, show plugin content is enabled. So under motion flow content, motion composer, blueprints, simulation, here you'll find generic conveyor, overhead crane, workstation trigger, dynamic workstation, and we're going to use all of this in this tutorial. So so let's leave our browser pointing here, or our content browser pointing here. So I'm going to drag and drop the generic conveyor here, and this is the direction the conveyor is going to go. So you want me to make it point in the direction you want. So I'm going to rotate it over here, and we want it to start over here. So now there are certain configuration that you can do for this conveyor. So if you go down to the details panel over here, if you scroll down, there is an item creation section. So here it will ask what item class you want to create. Now we created an engine pattern, which we called demo engine pattern. So I'm going to select that here, and you'll see that that gets populated or spawned over here. So now we realize that we do want the spawning to happen somewhere over here. So I'm going to move my conveyor here a little here. It doesn't quite matter, but it's just for visual purposes. So now the other thing that we want our conveyor to do is to have cylinders or rollers on which the pattern is going to roll. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, this is how you do it. So if you scroll down below the item creation, there's a decoration section, and then there's a decoration mesh. So we're going to choose a cylinder mesh here. This is something that we provide. You can have your own, and then we're going to customize this so that it matches the width of this table, and it matches and we want it to be thicker, and then we want them to be touching each other. So first let's match the width of the table. So we're going to scale the mesh. So looks like by scaling this we are scaling the radius. Let's do that anyways because we want to do that, but I also want to scale it along this dimension. So 2 is too much. Well, we can also click and drag here so that we get a bit more interactive experience. So now this is the, let's say the width, roughly the width we want. We want it to be actually a bit thicker. So this should be good. And now we can reduce the spacing, the mesh spacing, so that they are more dense or more next to each other. So this looks about right. So now what we want to do is we want to extend this conveyor to go around the curve and then end over here. So we can double click on this control point here, and then you can move this forward. I'm going to undo that because we want to move only along Y, so make sure that that is highlighted. And then somewhere around here, I'm going to stop. And then if you click Alt, let's go click that again. You can click Alt, and then that will create another point. So you see there was this original point, and this secondary point was created. So you're going to place it here, and then I want to rotate it a bit so that it is pointing along the direction. And it looks like I went down a bit, so I'm going to undo that. When I was moving, I didn't lock it in the correct plane. So let's try that again. So going to press Alt, and then going to move it over here. So this time you see that I am in the XY plane, and that's what is highlighted on the gizmo here. I'm going to stop that here, and then I'm going to rotate in this along this axis. So this looks good. So now this point got rotated as well. So I'm going to rotate it back so that so this conveyor kind of goes along here, and then like the tangent goes like this. For this the tangent goes like this. So this roughly follows the table here, and if you want to fine tune it, you can do that too a bit to make sure that it matches the table a bit more. So you can spend time on it and make it exactly match. I'm not going to do that for this tutorial. So that's how basically you set up the length of the conveyor. So now the item should be spawned and move over here, and we can look at that. If I hit play, you'll see that there's that item. And then remember, in the last tutorial we had the engine block assembled and the gearbox not assembled, and this is what we meant for it to do, is that the gearbox is not currently assembled. We are going to use a crane to assemble it. So I'm going to stop that. Now one thing we want to do is to move this engine block above the rollers. So if you select, if you are still have the conveyor selected, or if you select it, then under the item creation there is this item relative transform. So now we want the Z to move up here so that it's kind of sitting on the roller. So now if you hit play, then you'll see that I'm going to unselect everything and hit play, and now you see that it rolls on top of those rollers, and which is what we want. So if you want, like for example, in your case, you want the gear, like the entire thing to be rotated, like this entire platform to be rotated, you can do that too. So in this case, it doesn't matter, but for illustration, let's do that. We want it to rotate about Z, and we want it to rotate 180 degrees. So again, I did that by under the item creation for the conveyor belt settings, and I set this to 180 degrees. So now it points towards here. So that's how you set a basic conveyor up. Now we want two workstations on this conveyor. We want one somewhere around here and one somewhere around here. We're going to have the worker do something here and a crane do something over here. So let's create those workstations. So if you scroll up under the conveyor section, there are pause locations. So we're going to create two pause locations here. And then we are going to enable preview pause locations because we want them to be visible. And you can set the times here. Like these are the times of, these are the centimeter units of how far away this pause location is from the start. So we want it around 4 meters away. Let's say we want it around 350 centimeters away. And the next one we want to be, let's say, towards the end. Maybe this one I want it a bit closer over here. That looks about right. So so now it should pause over here, and then it will continue to move because it is set to auto move. So it's going to stop, and then it's going to move immediately to the next pause location. So now in our simulation, we want us to control how the conveyor moves, because we want once it stops over here, we want our character to, instead in the first tutorial we performed a drill over here. So now in this case we want him to perform some drill action over here, and then we want it to move forward here, and once it arrives over here we want a crane to pick up the gearbox assembly that we created and install it over here. So let's stop that and let's do that. So first we want to disable start at begin play. So then the conveyor won't start moving by itself, and we want to enable manual move over here. So once we have done that and you hit play, then the conveyor should not move anymore by itself or even start, because we have disabled those things. We are going to use the scenario graph to do that. So now what we want our character to do is we want him to perform a drill action over here. So we need to specify that drill action. In order to do that, we need to, and for doing something like that on a moving target, like in this case or a dynamic target. In this case, this pattern that gets created. Now we need to specify with respect to that pattern on this pause location. So you can't directly do that because those don't exist right now. And this is just a preview. You can't really define tasks on this preview. So what you can do is you can create a dynamic workstation here, which is again under Motion Composer, Blueprint, Simulation. So we're going to create a dynamic workstation. Where you create the dynamic workstation doesn't matter because we're going to attach the dynamic workstation to the moving pattern. And we're going to do that with a trigger. So I'm also dragged and dropped a trigger here. I'm going to rotate it so that it's perpendicular to the conveyor. You don't have to, but this is basically a volume trigger. And we are going to set it so that when the engine pattern hits it, then it will attach this dynamic workstation that we are going to create to the engine pattern that hits it. So in order to do that, we're going to select that. So this is the trigger item class, like, who do you want to trigger with? In this case, we want to trigger with our demo engine pattern class, which is the class that we are spawning over here. And then what do you want to attach? Which target workstation you want to attach? And the dynamic workstation, this is the one that we created, and this is filtered to show only dynamic workstations. So it only shows one because we only have one. So I'm going to select that. So that trigger is now set up to do its thing. Now you only need to configure your dynamic workstation. So here in dynamic workstation, item cluster preview, we are also going to select demo engine pattern here, because that's what we're going to specify our task relative to. And this kind of shows up in a fully assembled fashion. That's how things are currently. This might change in the future, but right now it will always show fully assembled. So here on this, now you can specify tasks just like how you normally do. So this is just a regular, almost like a regular actor in the world. So you can go into the details panel under add components. You can select MC task, and then we're going to, in the task performance, we're going to do perform generic, and then action we're going to choose drill, and item type we are also going to choose drill. So that creates that drill action there. So we're going to place it now at the location that we want. So if I pull it out, then you can see that the drill item has been created. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And let's say we want him to drill somewhere around here, like so. And then this arrow, if you remember, represents where the character is going to approach from. We want him to approach here, so I double clicked it and then I rotated it. So this is now the task has been specified. I'm going to call it perform drill so that we can select that in our scenario graph. And that's what we're going to do next. So this was the scenario graph instance that we dropped into the world, or it is saved here under the demo folder, tutorial scenario BP. I created that in the demo folder tutorial folder over here in the first tutorial, which I've moved over here to the demo folder now. So if you open that, then this was the scenario graph that we created in the first tutorial. So now instead of the performing drill over here, we're going to make him perform drill on this, or this dynamic workstation that gets attached to the pattern on the conveyor. So I'm going to delete this guy over here, and it gives me a warning because it's being used. I'm going to go say yes, delete it. Ensure that you delete this over here too. And we're just going to compile that so that it's all cleaned up. So now we are going to perform a drill action on this pattern. So I could have, instead of deleting, let me do undo. So perform drill. So the workstation has been invalidated because we deleted that. In this case, we are going to select the dynamic workstation. So I type dynamic, and then that brings me in the drop down the workstation I want. Perform drill is the only task on it, so that was automatically selected. So that's basically now is going to perform the drill on the dynamic workstation. But this is still not going to work. Let's see what happens, because the conveyor is not moving. the item is not being spawned, so this will face some error. So the perform drill is going to it looks like it's just performing the drill action on that dynamic workstation that we have placed over here, and that doesn't make sense, right? Like we wanted to perform it on the conveyor, so let's do that. So if you right click in the scenario graph under motion composer, you can perform start conveyor move. So, and then under conveyor, we're going to select the conveyor we have. So this is the trigger. So, and this set to repeat, it will repeat every time, like, it's finished moving, it will repeat itself. So, and then the way scenario graph works, and this we didn't get into the details here, is that every branch gets executed all the way till the end, and then that causes the root node to repeat. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to, in order to demonstrate that, we're going to drag out the execute pin here. And under motion composer, I'm going to choose item arrived on conveyor. And now this is a special node. The conveyor is already selected because I dragged out from that start conveyor node. And then these are the pause locations. Then it will give you the item that has arrived at this pause location. And if you want another one of these, I'm going to duplicate that, and then we can select that here too. And for this, I'm going to select pause location 1, which is this one. So it will give us execution for when the item arrives at this node. So every time an item arrives here, the conveyor will move again. So let's demonstrate that by adding a wait node. So we also provide a wait node. So let's say we want to wait for 1 second, and then we want it to move on. Similarly here, we want it to wait for 1 second, and we want it to move on. So I'm going to hit compile, save, and then if you hit that, so now we'll see that it's moving because it's being moved by our scenario graph. I'll wait for 1 second, and then I'll move. That wasn't quite clear, so I'm going to make it wait for 3 seconds so that it's more obvious that it is actually waiting there. So, and then that demonstrates how the scenario graph works. So this node is being executed. Now the wait is being executed. Once the wait finishes 3 seconds, then it goes to the root, it executes. This is still waiting for item to arrive. So the item has arrived, 3 seconds has been waited, and then it goes back and re-executes the start conveyor move. So every time a branch finishes, the root node will get re-executed. So now we have set up a conveyor how we want. Now instead of doing the wait nodes, we will want our character to perform a drill action over here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to stop this. And then we want it to do on pause location 1. So pause location 1 will be we already have a location where we wanted to drill, which is on the dynamic workstation. So all we wanted to do is that when this event happens, is when the item arrives on conveyor, then we want it to do perform drill. So, and then now you will notice that the conveyor is not going to move further unless perform drill has been executed, and until actually the put down drill has been executed as well. So it looks like we have done something wrong here. It is still not attaching correctly to the conveyor. And what we need to do is we need to actually create a collision geometry, because this trigger volume requires a collision for it to occur, for a collision to occur before it can attach, which we don't have in this pattern that we have created. So if you go to the engine pattern blueprint here, we're just going to create any kind of collision geometry. It doesn't matter, but it needs to be encompassing this object. So you could choose box, capsule, or sphere collision. I'm just going to choose box. And you can make it so that it kind of encompasses the object. So I'm going to hit compile and save. And now our attach should be working correctly. And then this is a breakpoint that I added to debug this. I'm just going to disable this, and we're going to continue. So now the perform drill is performed onto the location that we specified, but on the engine pattern, on the demo engine pattern that is on the conveyor. Now notice that only after put down drill has been performed, that's when the conveyor starts moving. So let's look at that again. I'm going to stop this, I'm going to play this. He's going to pick this up, and if you pay attention here to this scenario graph simulation here, and the character is going to do perform drill, and now the next action that needs to be performed is put down drill. That's when this branch, when this finishes, that's when this branch is finished. That's when the start conveyor can actually run again. So if that's not what we want, if let's say what we want him to perform the drill, and as soon as the drill has been performed, we want the conveyor to move. We want the branch to terminate here. So we don't want this action here, but we only want put down to happen after the perform drill has happened, right? So because you can't put it down before you've done your action. So instead of doing a hard execute like this, like a hard execution dependency, you can just have a dependency here. So you can so I'm alt clicking. So if you want to remove a arrow or a wire between two nodes, you press alt and click on it, so that removes it. So now we're going to use this dependency out instead, which is a lighter gray arrow. So that creates a dependency, but it's not an execution dependency. So now my branch, if you notice this icon, this means this is where the branch ends. So so if I remove this and then I connect the execution here, you would notice that that icon is gone because the branch is ending over here. So I'm going to remove this, connect this over here. So this is a brand, like a whole graph of itself. So it has this icon, which means it's going to repeat, but it will only run when this has been executed, because this guy depends on this guy. That's what we have established, that dependency, by connecting this dependency out to the input of this put down drill. So if it play now, so now the character should go perform the drill, and then the moment the perform drill finishes, we will see that the start conveyor gets executed again, which will cause the conveyor to move forward, which is what we want. So that also demonstrates how the dependencies and executions can be used to your advantage. So that basically kind of shows you how to use conveyors along with characters. So you do want one or the other kind of dependency, either an execution one or a plain dependency. In these kind of cases, for example, when you pick up, then you want an execution dependency to perform drill, and this perform drill also you want an execution dependency on the item arrived on conveyor, because you don't want the conveyor to move until you perform the drill. So that's why you have this kind of flow set up. So next we're going to ignore that error. There's some misconfiguration that I must have done. Next we're going to set up a gearbox assembly. So in the next tutorial, I'm going to talk about how we can use spawn inventory item for you to use for various purposes. We're going to look at the spawn node. We're going to look at cranes and how cranes can use spawn items. You can use spawn items with characters as well, but we're going to use the cranes as an example. We're going to pick up that spawn gearbox, and then we're going to assemble that over this install location over here.